This year's new blockbuster, Hook, directed by Steven Spielberg and stars Robin Williams, follows a character named Peter who has discovered through adulthood that he's had a very successful career, but his career is the fundamental number one thing in his life. Now, Peter has a very beautiful family. He has a young boy, a young girl, and a very charismatic and nice wife, in which he seems to put second best compared to his job. Now, as Peter interacts with his family and goes back home to discover his roots, which he hasn't been to back for about 10 years or so, he discovers that the boyish charm that he once had as he looks back on his life through the lens of a fantasy world makes him realize that through imagination and seeing the joy in the things that he's found quite cynical as an adult, he's able to reconnect with his family and, more importantly, rediscover who he was. Now, I went into this movie without seeing too many reviews. I had heard the story of Peter Pan, in which this movie is based on. If you haven't heard of Peter Pan before, I would suggest don't do any research. Like, make Hook your first experience of Peter Pan. Now, if you're wondering why it's called Hook, well, as Peter goes into this fantasy world to rediscover who he is, he's going back to a world where he was a child. And the pirates in this movie, in this fantasy world, actually represent adulthood and who adults are, which I found to be a very, very cool theme of the movie. How Peter interacts with those pirates is also very fun and a great experience. And for the first 15 minutes of the movie or so, you don't feel like you're about to watch a fantasy movie. You feel like you're about to watch some kind of Oscar drama. And you really get invested in the family. You really get invested in Peter's journey in adulthood. And you want him to, early on, you want him to get on with his son, who he seems to have this real disconnect with. That's what I found really powerful about the first 15 minutes. Then I have to say, out of nowhere, you are exploded into a fantasy world. What I really liked about this fantasy world is it wasn't overly dependent on CGI. In fact, I would say there is about 5% CGI in this whole movie, which is quite weird for modern times. Steven Spielberg has actually gone out and built a set. Now, this set feels like you are in a different world. So it's really, really impressive. It's really creative. The world that the Lost Boys live in, these tree houses, where they have dinner, it's all very, very amazing. In saying that, though, I did know I was watching a set. So it does transform you somewhere, but a little bit of CGI would have helped this movie. In fact, I think quite a lot. Like, you can tell they've been a little bit lazy with the CGI on top of the set, but I'll come into dislikes a little bit later. The other thing I really, really liked in this movie was the cast. Robin Williams is, as always, absolutely outstanding. In fact, outstanding to the point where I can't think of another modern day actor who could play this role. I can't think of anyone. I think Robin Williams has been perfectly cast for this movie. He does such a great job of taking you from that professional businessman who doesn't really care about his family to a lost boy, or a boy that can technically live forever in joy and imagination. And the contrast between those characters is really dramatic, and it takes a special actor to do that. Robin Williams really did that well. The second thing is part of the casting that I like is the kids. I think the kids do an outstanding job in this movie. There's a young boy, young girl. They go on a bit of an emotional roller coaster throughout the movie. They experience some crazy things. You really feel like they've been transported into a fantasy world as well. You really feel like the boy is so disappointed in his dad. They really take you with their emotions throughout the movie. The other thing I liked was the diversity of the Lost Boys. I felt, and I'll get into this in the dislikes as well, I felt there was, you're following an all-white cast who suffer like family problems, but they're living in a beautiful house and they're traveling the world and the son's playing baseball. You can tell this family doesn't have a lot of real-world problems that's hard for a lot of people to relate to. But when you get into this fantasy world and you start to see a whole cast of characters, I was really impressed with the Lost Boys. I felt like there was a lot of diversity there. I felt like you could walk into a classroom now of 8 to 12-year-olds and there would be the different cultures represented within that elementary school class. I've already touched on this, so I'll talk about it again. Really felt like the movie could use some CGI. There's a scene where he's chasing his shadow. There's fairies in the movie. That it all feels a bit, like it's 20 years old or so. I feel like some CGI could have really helped this movie and really transformed you to where you're going, especially with the fact that they built a set. Like they built the set and it felt very real. Just a nice little overlay of some details to make it feel a bit more real, like you weren't actually on a set, would be really, really cool. There's a scene where there's a lot of just unrealistic stuff that I thought wasn't needed to be so unrealistic. I think there's a scene where the kids go missing. I'm sorry if that's a spoiler and giving too much away. The kids go missing. The parents look concerned, but they don't look distraught. And these are their kids. Like this is their world. These kids are like perfect. Like the friggin' lost their, like someone's probably broke. The house is destroyed, by the way, when the kids are gone. Like the house is actually a wreck. The babysitter's on the floor, like she's been punched. And the kids have disappeared with windows open and shit. Like that's scary. That's scary. I'd be looking for ransom notes. I'd be thinking if shit's not sorted out in 24 hours, I'll never see my kids again. You do not get that vibe. So although the acting in this movie is good, there's some unrealistic bits and pieces. Also the fight at the end. There's a big fight. Every movie has a big fight at the end, so that's not a spoiler. Very annoying scenarios in which the good guy, decides to fight the bad guy again and whatnot. That was kind of frustrating. It's a little bit of a sexist movie. There's a lot of men. For 2021, the 2020s, like, I want to see a little bit more diversity. The girl is very dependent on her mother. She's very drawn to her mother. She is a strong-willed girl. She handles some scenarios significantly better than the boy does. But there's a lot of focus on the boy. This family has a lot of focus on how the boy is feeling, the connection between the boy and the dad. I actually feel like the daughter could have had more of a main presence in the key plot of this movie. Favorite scenes in the movie. There's an amazing food fight where once again they haven't used any CGI. That food fight without CGI is phenomenal. Like I think that was perfectly done. I thought it was really, really cool. It's also awesome watching Peter Pan become Peter Pan and starting to give the kids insults the way that kids insult each other when they're 11 and 12. That was really cool. There's a really powerful scene when they first get to this fantasy world and Peter interacts with the lost boy, and one of the lost boys just kind of looks at his face and his body and he sees this bloated old man, but he sees behind that, he sees Peter Pan. He sees the person he once knew, and that scene is really powerful. Really good score for this movie as well. I have to say the score is phenomenal. They do have the score in a lot of scenes. I feel like there are some scenes that could have used without the score in the background. It's quite distracting, but a really good score at that. And then the other favorite scene for me is Rufio. Rufio is a character that's kind of taken Peter Pan's place in Neverland. He is essentially another Peter Pan, and he's not quite Peter Pan. He can't do all these kind of cool tricks that Peter Pan can do, but he is the head honcho there. And there's a cool scene when we first see him, and it kind of brings to life the Lost Boys world in this fantasy world, which is very creative, very cool. So overall, I thought the plot was staged really well, great casting, really good acting, although there were some scenes where it didn't feel realistic based on the scenario. You're sitting there going, oh man, I'd be going crazy right now. So overall, good cast, good staging of the movie, good plot, very easy to watch. I think this movie will age well. I think there's a lack of, like, for a movie now, it felt a bit cheap. Like I thought there was, not cheap in terms of them building the set, but cheap in terms into the finishing touches. Like they could have used a bit more CGI. They could have got the movie a bit up to current times with it being a little bit sexist towards a lot of men, a very male-dominated movie. But overall, I think it was a really good movie. I was hooked. Excuse the pun, and I didn't really feel like time was going by. So when the movie ended, um, I was not like ready for it to end. I was completely encapsulated in the movie. So overall, I think it was a great watch, and I'm going to give it a B plus. Anyway, catch you later. Thank you.